Good morning and welcome to the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting of Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Sechelt and Squamish First Nations. We have an amended agenda this morning. I hope that nobody's going to go, and you got it all. And I'm going to propose that we slightly reorder the agenda in order to move item 5, the Eastbourne Groundwater Development Contract, up to the top, ahead of number 2, because we may have attendance from Eastbourne. So, might I see a motion to pass our amended agenda? Moved? Seconded? All in favor? Thank you. All right.
Chair, before you proceed, could I ask for another amendment, if that's possible? And that is to move item 7 up, mainly because I'm going to be sitting through SCRD items that I can't vote on. And I do have an 11 o'clock meeting I want to be at. So I'd just like to make sure that I get through the full agenda if that's possible.
Right. Do we re-amend our agenda? What is our procedure?
We haven't actually voted on this, have we?
Yes, we did, but...
Yeah. We can re-amend it.
Yeah, we can re-amend it.
Okay. So that looks like Director Beamish is moving to re-amend the agenda. Is that seconded?
Amend the amended agenda.
Amend the amended agenda. Is that seconded? All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that we can get through our agenda by 11, but we'll see. So I would entertain a motion to accept all reports and communications. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much.
Chair McMahon, GM Rosenboom had indicated that he needed to say something. So,
I beg your pardon.
Sorry for the. My question was more: where is the quarterly report is going to fit in the amended agenda? It's moved
Sorry.
up. But
It will be 5 becomes 2 and 7 becomes 3.
Okay.
Does that work?
So what you're saying is 5, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 2, 3, 4, 6.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, good. All right, thank you very much. So, the Eastbourne contract, groundwater development, Annex D. Who is presenting this? Over
Thank
to
you,
you,
Chair.
Jim.
I will present that report. In 2020, staff assessed the options to increase the water supply to the Eastbourne water system on Keys Island. The purpose of this report is to request approval for the execution of the contract to complete the next phase of this project. The phase will include the completion of a technical analysis, engaging in negotiations with the private well owner with the intention of the SRD securing access to and use of surplus water from the private well for use on the Eastbourne water system. In the event that the private well is found to be unattainable, the budget provides for a pivot to a test well drilling program with the intention of finding new sources of groundwater for the Eastbourne water system. Under either scenario, the scope also includes analysis of developing more water storage for the Eastbourne water system. Staff are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. I have taken advantage of my mighty powers to promote Dan Rogers into our meeting. Dan is with the Islands Trust and he lives on Keys Island. So, directors, are there questions about this report? Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. And just thanks for Trustee Rogers to be able to attend in our Zoom meeting, and because he is a experienced Eastbourne resident. So I was just wondering about if staff could just review the the financing, how the breakdown of the three components of the reserves, the community works and the development cost charges, how it all comes together as a package. This is going back 18 months ago, so just a bit of a refresher. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Director Hills. So the budget proposal, as adopted last year, is to fund a portion of the $350,000, $107,000 from capital reserves from the regional water system. There is gas tax available for Area F, and almost $45,000 of that is allocated to this project as well. And the remainder is almost $200,000, 198. That's coming from DCC's development cost charges. In those cases, in that case, for the DCCs and the capital reserves, it's the DCCs and the capital reserves funds that are allocated for the entire regional water system. So not only Eastbourne specific. And I'm happy to answer any questions there.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, I think we've had this discussion before, and I know that island residents also pay for some services that they don't get much use of here on the mainland, but it still irks me to some extent that that the larger community is bailing out a relatively small number of property owners who chose to buy on an island knowing it had water issues, because this is nothing new, and therefore they paid lower real estate fees for or paid less for their real estate because it did have water issues, and now we're bailing them out. So it kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I just want to see if somebody can convince me again why we're spending so much money over there.
Who would like to take that hot potato? Anyone? I'll ask Trustee Rogers if he's got an opinion on this matter.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I appreciate it. I'm sorry for my technical delay, and nice to see you all again, and nice to meet you, Remco. I've talked to you on the phone, but not seen you before, and there's the CAO, of course. I think you should be aware that, of course, that we pay all of the same fees and charges that into the water systems that in Eastbourne that all of the Sunshine Coast residents do. We pay not only a tax-based system, but also a service fee every year, which has gone up from, I would say, $450 total 5 or 6 years ago to well over $900. So a lot of our money is actually going into the system-wide basis, i.e. the Sunshine Coast-wide basis, not just the Eastbourne system. Now, I don't have the numbers to indicate whether or not our system is a break-even or indeed a profit center for the SCRD, but I would be pretty sure that it's not a cost drain on the SCRD, and this is a proposal to. I mean, frankly, perhaps Remco can start it. I was a little surprised that there was a move to do a capital upgrade on our water system. But there is a growing population on the island and a demand on the system. But it's not like we don't pay into the SCRD to do it. I can show you my tax that has the $360 a year land charge, and I can show you my infrastructure service bill that I get separately every year, which is over $400 a year, and I'm guessing will go up. So I think your characterization of that is incorrect. I could take you back 22 years as to when the SCRD agreed to take on this water system, which was a community-based water system, and the reasons why I did it, but it was done a number of years ago. and we gave the land to the SCRD, and they've been running the system. And I think, and there's a bunch of capital stuff that has never happened, but I believe it has operated on a cost recovery basis. But Remco could tell you better than I could about the numbers, or somebody else could.
Thank you. I'm just going to point out that we operate our sewer systems as individual services where only the property owners who are on the system pay into it. But the decision was made back in the day, for whatever reason, that when we've taken on a couple of these small water services, and Grantham's is another one, we've added them to the regional water service. I'm not, that was a decision made long, long ago. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Director Hiltz's question. I think during the agenda review, I think he was looking for a little more clarification. What he was looking for was how was the amount from the gas tax community works funding calculated, and how was the amount from the development cost charges determined? And I believe you have that information. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the follow-up question. I realized after I was done that was indeed part of the question. The amount of the DCCs was determined in 2015. The DCC bylaw we have was last updated, and in that bylaw there are specific projects and amounts listed that where the DCCs can be used for. And there are two line items that are related to several items related to the Eastbourne water system, and two are related to groundwater testing, and the other one is for land acquisition for the purpose of groundwater water supply expansion. So hence we combined the two amounts, and that gave the amount of 198,000. And the community tax, gas tax, we did an analysis of what was the annual contribution we received per capita for area F, and multiplied it by 3 years, and times the number of residents on the system. And that's the same formula we use for other calculations for gas tax in 2020.
That was helpful. Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Okay, I'm gonna take on the director ties. Why this water system? And I think if we could use hindsight, we would have redesigned the regional district completely differently 50 years ago. My understanding of the SCRD regional water service, it is a cobbled together water system that goes back 60 years. Langdale was separate. Soames Point was separate. Grantham's was separate. Gibson's was still separate, well, although we're connected. Pender Harbor was separate. So does it make sense? The place where it makes sense is the economies of scale that the regional district can bring to the region. So that's where I fall down is in order for the whole community to work, we all kind of pool our resources to work on these economies of scale. And I think the wastewater is an example of where the load is shifted very much towards the individual users, whereas the water is a much more primary resource in terms of the distribution of the resource. So and the province essentially kind of said we have to do it this way. When they were these improvement districts, they said take it over. There was really not a lot of options. So we're into it. It does seem like a lot for a small water system, but I can say, and I think Dan might also say, that Eastbourne is probably one of the most frugal water systems in their consumption of any water system in the regional water. So I'm supportive of it. Does it all make sense in the end? Generally, I think it does. And so, yeah, I'm supportive of the recommendations. So thanks.
Thank you. I see GM Rosenboom.
Thank you for the opportunity. There's maybe one thing I can clarify, that if we are successful with the negotiation with the private well owner and securing that surplus of water, I anticipate that the ultimate cost will be way less than $100,000. So the big costs are associated with the drilling of the well. So I'm really hopeful that we can complete that negotiation in a successful manner and bring the cost way down for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Tyes.
Yeah, I don't know if these arguments were convincing, but I'm not super, I'm not a big fan of the decisions that were made 22 years ago. I guess we'll leave it at that. Yeah, I just don't think it's fair that some people have to, pay for their wastewater. But, it's a sort of akin to somebody buying a property out in a desert and then asking the community 20 kilometers away to supply them with water because it's better for economies of scale. So, well, we're stuck with it now, I guess. But I won't be moving it, so somebody else gets to do that.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks. If I will move the recommendations as presented on page 179 of the agenda package.
And is that seconded? That's seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? None opposed. That passes. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Dan, for coming.
Nice, you very, very nice. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to Director Hiltz for flagging this one for me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so next up, it appears actually the most fun part of our agenda, we get to have our dessert first, is the Q4 Infrastructure Services Report. So, over to GM Rosenboom.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. This report provides an overview of some of the activities undertaken by the Infrastructure Services Department during the fourth quarter of 2021. The report indicates the staff are working on several water main replacement projects in parallel. Some of these are in design and some are in construction phase. There are several significant improvements being undertaken to improve our water treatment and water supply for the regional water system, including several upgrades to the existing Chapman water treatment plant and, of course, the Church Road Bow project, which is actually for which the actual construction most likely will start late February, early March, and is anticipated to be completed over the summer. It's also for the first time that this report includes an overview of the development-related files that staff are working on to determine the impacts on the water and wastewater services. Significant progress is also made on the feasibility study for a new watershed protection service, and the results of this project will be presented at the next month's committee meeting. The report also highlights the impact of the SRD Green Bin program on the amount of waste buried at the landfill. In 2021, about 230 tons of food waste was composed instead of buried, which is a reduction of the amount in the order of 5% of the total amount buried. We anticipate that the implementation of an organic curbside collection program by the district of Sechelt in December 2021 could have a similar impact. An updated estimate on the remaining lifespan of the Sechelt landfill will be completed in the upcoming months. The total amount of materials delivered to the recycling depots is a bit higher than it was last year and about 15% higher compared to 2020. And staff are happy to answer any questions you might have on the report.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions? Director Tyes.
Yes, thank you. On page 188 at the top, it says Groundwater Investigation Phase 3, Part 2. Is that for Langdale? Because I believe we already have our water license for Church Road, so I'm just clarifying what this item pertains to.
Thank you for the question. Yes, that's our error that we haven't identified that specifically, but the first bullet is indeed the Langdale project and the second bullet is Marianne West. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Yes, I didn't see any reference in this report to watersheds. And I guess the question is, does this come under infrastructure, or does it come under um, other areas of our operations? Because there's a lot of opportunity, I believe, right now for us to be pushing hard with the provincial government on watershed protection. The new announcement that came out this past week on watershed protection, the opportunity to have input into the development of a provincial fund, which is estimated to be somewhere in the area of up to $700 million to be put aside for watershed protection. I think we need to be there. We need to be coordinated on that, and with all governments involved. So I just wonder, where does that fall into the planning?
Great question. Staff?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. At page 190, there is an update presented in terms of the watershed protection project that we currently have on the go.
Okay.
And the results of that will be presented at next month's meeting. And that will be in time for also for responding to the province, because the deadline is March 18th.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and the other thing about that is the idea of publicizing through all of our avenues the opportunity for the public to also have input into that watershed protection. We will be identifying that and sending that out as highlighting that in our newsletters. And it would be great if we could all highlight that so that the public knows there's the importance of it, and that we see there's an opportunity there to move forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Pratt?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on bottom of page 189, top of page 190, the water and wastewater service reviews. It's so great to see all of this information in one place, because and I'm sorry if it's been reported on in the past. This is the first time I remember seeing it, and I was like, oh my God, thank you. Because it's really interesting to see how much is under development and what and seeing that part, and then also getting kind of the flag of, okay, we might have some more wastewater treatment plants coming up. So, and I see a few in my area. Nice. But yeah, no, it's I really appreciate that, GM Rosenboom. Like that's really good, and it's good information for the community, because a lot of times we're hearing about these anecdotally, and we don't know, as directors and as elected, we may not know where they are in the process. So having it at least here is a really great way to say, okay, no, yeah, this is coming up. So thank you so much for including that in there.
I agree, that's good information, and I'm going to just follow up on that. Bylaw, I think it's bylaw 320 is the bylaw that determines whether we take on wastewater plants. Is looking at that in the work plan?
Thank you. Thanks for your question, Director McMahon, Chair McMahon. The board directed at the December 2020 meeting staff to review bylaw 320, and the review is currently being undertaken, and we hope to provide an update to the board on the wastewater component of the bylaw, because the bylaw is quite comprehensive, and hopefully in the upcoming 6 months.
Terrific. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I have a request for Director Beamish with regards to the watershed. I'd ask that you have your communications people reach out to the communications people in the other municipalities and the other governments, and then they can, sorry, it's in my throat, they could coordinate some kind of message out to the community so we can make sure it gets widely disseminated.
I'll follow up with Elizabeth on that. I know we have established a website section strictly for the watershed, and all of the information we're receiving is going into that section. And then we will be putting out some direct promotion or advertising or information about that to all of the 2,000 contacts that she has on her information system. So
Okay.
that it'd be good to broaden that. Thank you.
All right. And then on page 190, yes, it was nice to see this in one place here. One of the ones I wanted to just draw some attention to is the Binnacle Avenue, 605 lots or units and water. I didn't know where that was. So it's actually the 300 acres on the far end of Seashelt. So while they're looking at planning for water for that many lots, this will be probably a multi-year build-out. We don't actually even have the plans. Well, we have plans, but I mean, it hasn't come to council yet. There's all kinds of things involved in this. How do we deal with schooling, for example? So it's going to be a big project that will take many years to roll out. But in the meantime, we have to plan so that when those houses all are built, or those units are all built, that they actually have water.
Thank you. I'm just going to observe that the green waste volume on page 200 is a little bit down from last year, thank heavens. I didn't warn you of this question, but we've had budget overruns on green waste the last few years. Are we going to come in on budget this time? She said, hopefully.
I haven't heard any red flags that we won't, but I would need to confirm that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, I'm not seeing any further hands. Yes. Oh, okay. Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. It is a question I didn't ask for. This is kind of the routine, but I don't think Q4 was a routine month or quarter for infrastructure services. We had emergency repairs and so it was not ordinary. And there's nothing really in your report to draw attention to the lack of ordinariness of the last quarter. Whether there's something you could tell us and say how you guys are dealing with recovering from these emergencies, and is Q1 going to be more regular than the last quarter? That's a prediction. Sure, that's rhetorical. But if you can say something about the emergency aspect of what staff are going through and the challenges, I suppose, of the department. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks to Director for allowing me to express that. I think 2020 in general was an interesting year. We started with water main issues at the Chapman treatment plant. We had an EOC in Q3, and we had water main issues in November. So 2021 was a year of a lot of anomalies, and I think what we're trying to incorporate in our work plan is that it will be the new normal. But that means that, especially for our engineering staff and our operating staff, but also our capital project staff, that are they sometimes get additional projects on their already overflowing plate. For example, the water main we now are dealing with at the Seashelt Airport wasn't the project that was on our plan, but does it need attention? Yes. So will something else be deferred or slowed down? Yes, as a result, because that group is still, we still have 1.5 FTE vacant there. And so there are 3 FTE there, but if you throw another project on them, something else will need to come up. That's how it works. In general, the morale is good. The commitment is there, but it's the sheer amount of work. So fingers crossed that there's no similar kind of emergencies happening in upcoming months, so we can move some progress, especially with the church road starting to construct. We really would like to keep our focus where we need to have it and not on emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, GM Rosenboom and all the infrastructure department. Over to Director Seegers.
Thank you. 2 things. One is a follow-up to what Director Hilt said. I don't think the community knows much of what the infrastructure department has been doing over the last year. Like all of the emergencies they've been taking. Yes, they know about the, where water was not available because pipes broke, et cetera, but not the emergencies, particularly the one like at the airport right now. Community doesn't know that's on our work plate. I'm wondering how we could ensure that information gets out to the community. Is it part of the EOC? Maybe there's some EOC communication. I just want to kind of put that in staff's wheelhouse. I'm not looking for answers now, but when we come forward and we say, well, this project timeline may be delayed, well, they don't know that we've had to devote time and staff resources to some of those other issues because it hasn't been communicated. So I think that's something we need to let the community know as well, because our infrastructure department is working really hard on all kinds of things and putting in all kinds of hours. And then I wanted to kind of end this on a really positive note. Bottom of page 187. The last line says, a groundbreaking ceremony is being arranged with the contractor and SCRD elected officials to signify the importance of this project. And that's for the Church Road Wellfield construction. I think we're all looking forward to that. And we look forward to having the celebration about the project starting. Thanks.
Thank you. We are all looking forward. It's about 2 years since we were last at Grantham's for a ceremony, and then COVID struck. So just keep your fingers crossed, everyone. So next up on our agenda is item 2, solid waste management plan amendment for waste export. Over to Jim Rosenboom again. No.
Mia Manager Ebrook is joining. And I think that Alana Whitman will be joining us as well. Let's see if I don't see her yet.
We've gone and reordered the agenda and confused everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
Lana will join shortly. I think the link on the agenda page is not quite right, so hold on.
Okay. In the meantime, I can introduce Alana to you. Alana Whitman is our coordinator for strategic initiatives. She works with Mia in the strategic initiatives team, and we hired her last year summer especially for these kind of projects. And bear with me a second while I'm joining us.
That's a very interesting sound. Technical difficulties.
Mia, do you otherwise have the introduction at hand or not?
For one,
There we go.
few more
It's
seconds.
okay.
Send her the proper link.
No, she's. I just promoted her. She's in the gallery.
Okay, thanks for your
Okay,
patience.
thank you. There she is.
Hi, sorry about that. Wrong link.
Okay,
It's over
go
to you,
ahead.
Alana.
Sorry, what was that, Remco?
It's over to you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Chair McMahon. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the engagement process and feedback received about a proposed amendment to the 2011 SCRD Solid Waste Management Plan. The proposed amendment would allow for temporary waste export should an interim waste disposal solution be needed between the closure of the Seashell landfill around 2025 and the opening of a new long-term solid waste disposal facility. Starting in late October, staff shared information about the proposed amendment through a variety of online platforms, as well as during online and in-person events. Staff reached out to the Sechelt and Squamish Nations about the proposal. Based on the engagement process summarized in the attachment of this report and the risk of not having a garbage disposal option following the closure of the Sechelt landfill, staff recommend the board directs staff to submit an application to amend the 2011 solid waste management plan to allow for temporary waste export. And staff are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions? I'll throw one out there. How long does it take the province typically to review and approve these amendments?
Thanks for the question. We anticipate it'll take about a year for the province to approve the amendment after we've submitted it. So we're planning to submit in around March. So we should have a response within a year.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
I'm willing to make the recommendation slightly amended as on page 1. The second part of the recommendation, and that the SCRD board direct staff to submit an application to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy for a proposed amendment to the 2011 SCRD Solid Waste Management Plan to allow for temporary export of waste for approval. That for approval part isn't quite right, but
Yeah.
put the for approval after the Ministry of Environment Climate Change Strategy.
Right.
For approval for a proposed amendment. Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
That is a motion on the floor from page 1. Do we have a seconder? We have a seconder. Do we have further discussion? It previously read that we were going to export the waste to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, which seemed like a great idea, but we decided we weren't going to go there. Okay, I'm calling the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much for that report. And now we're going to move on to the Drought Response Plan recommendations for 2022, Annex B. And I believe that's Jen Callahan, and is she available?
While we can wait for her, is she already in the gallery? No. Okay. What I will do is I will do the introduction instead. Thank you, Chair McMahon. Staff initiated its annual review of the Drought Management Plan and the associated SRD Water Rates and Regulation Bylaw number 422 to update their water conservation provisions. Review and update of the Drought Management Plan allows the SRD to meet the needs of the community, provide clear communication, efficient administration, and clarity for enforcement. The proposed updates to the DRP include an updated terms and definitions, including related to drip irrigation, adding new restrictions in stage 2 and 3 to limit times for watering by hand or drip irrigation, and eliminating the temporary lawn watering permit provisions. Considerations of an exemption for farms during stage 4 watering restrictions are also included. Should there be a change to the DRP, staff would bring forward the updated drought management plan and the bylaw 42 in March 2022. Communications plans and outreach and other material will be updated as well. Thank you for your time, and staff would welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. And interesting report, and I'm just going to draw the director's attention to, on page 171, we have an option A and an option B, and again on page 172, we have an option A and option B, plus anything else in there that you may want to discuss. So, do we have questions? Do we have opinions? Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 171, close to the bottom, right above where it talks about those two options, the last line says, in 2021, about 50% of permits, and this is for temporary lawn watering, issued remained active during stage 2. So I'd like to know, do we have an idea of what kind of numbers we're looking at for these permits? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. There were 27 permits still active during stage 2, while in total we issued 56 permits last year.
Director Ties.
Now, as I understand it, generally stage 3 gets called when we start dipping into reserves. Before that, we're still going by the flow that's going over the dam. So I'm wondering if our whole stages could be a little bit simplified. And like, I don't see much of a difference between stage 1 and 2. I honestly don't even look at what stage 1 actually means, and I'm the guy making the policy. So I wonder what the rest of the community does. I guess, yes, it does create awareness, but yeah, it's these are just some thoughts. I do think that we should also look at prohibiting once through cooling systems. And if that hasn't been done yet, and I like option A on page 172. Jury's still out on option A or B in 171.
I'll just ask staff, do we have the authority to ban once through cooling systems?
Thank you for the question. Staff have been looking into it this fall. One regulation we need to keep in mind is the BC Building Act, which regulates fixtures and water efficiency indoors. So we can't regulate on top of that act. So it's something we're exploring a bit further in terms of where once through cooling fits, and if it fits under that act, speaking with some neighboring jurisdictions that are going through the same thing as well. So it's definitely still on the list. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to jump in there myself and say that in terms of the lawn watering permits, I myself lean to option A because it's the simplest. But when it comes to the water conservation regulations for farms, I fairly strongly feel that we should allow the 2-week exemption. The farms on the Sunshine Coast are really suffering, and not just because of all the unexpected weather we've had and watering restrictions, but the cost of feed and other inputs like hay has skyrocketed this year, thanks to all the weather we were having in the hay growing and feed growing regions of North America. So a 2-week exemption is not a big deal in terms of the total volume of water, and I think it shows our commitment to local food production. So that's where I stand personally. I don't know how the rest of the directors are. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think it's a good opportunity for us to as well support the farmers. The other part of that is if we put that in place, then staff will take that into account when they actually call a stage 4, because they'll know that we've got that extra 2 weeks. So I'm in favor of doing that.
Director Pratt.
I think I'd be in favor of that as well, especially based on how many farms had incredible amount of damage in the lower mainland, which is where we do get a lot of supplies from. So I'd be in support of putting that additional support into our local farms, because farming is, having grown up in rural Alberta, I mean, I understand how difficult a mistress the weather can be. And it's, however we can support our local growers, especially in light of all of the damage BC farms have experienced over the last few months. I think it just bodes well for our community.
Thank you. I'm looking hopefully that there is a motion. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'd look to staff to see how they would want these options, option A for the lawn watering and option B for the farm watering, reflected in the recommendations, because it's not specifically indicated in there. It just says, as outlined in attachment A.
Thank you very much for the question. Option A, in terms of the lawn watering permit, is already included in the bylaw, in attachment A. And in terms of including the 2-week exemption, I would actually include it in the recommendation itself, so that there's a second recommendation added, or one additional, and that the 2-week exemption for farms during stage 4 will be included in the drought response plan and bylaw 42 as well.
Thank you.
Or
So does that need to be then before the two ones that are on our agenda package? Or does it need to be part of both of them?
The question, I would suggest to include it in, in between, after attachment A and then another and that.
Okay.
However, I would like to receive some direction from the board in terms of what is considered to be a farm, what is considered to be, and what kind of farms are exempt and not exempt. Last year, we specified that only farms that were metered with and were classified as farms under the BC Assessment Act were eligible for an exemption. So I would like to clarify with the board if that's what they're would like to see happening this year as well.
Okay. Yes, to qualified as farms under the BC Exemption Act, at least I think that makes sense. Regarding the metering, in the following report, I believe we're going to try and get the rest of the commercial farms onto metering, but are we going to be able to do it by this summer?
If farms would like to, there are currently 11 farms that are currently not metered yet. They're all located within the Seashield area. The remainder of the farms have meters in place. So for them, it's more on ours an administrative process to move them from flat rate to commercial rate if they want to qualify for an exemption.
So follow-up question. So we do have time then that those 11 farms could be metered, but we would need to reach out to them and tell them about this. All right? Director Seegers.
Okay, see if I can do this. I'm looking to Remco to correct me when I kind of stray off this. So we want, and that the drought response plan be updated to reflect the proposed updates outlined in attachment A of the report titled Drought Response Plan Recommendations 2022, and that option B, I have to find that page, option B, allowing for a 2-week exemption for commercial farms at the start of stage 4 be included. And further that this apply to those farms considered commercial or have commercial status? Is that what the wording is around that?
I think the best wording is that are classified as commercial under the BC Assessment Act.
Perfect.
And are and pay a metered commercial a commercial rate. That's
right. They're metered and pay commercial rates. Okay.
Yeah.
And further, that SCRD water rates and regulations bylaw number 422 be amended to align with the proposed updates outlined in attachment A as amended of the report titled Drought Response Plan Recommendations 2022.
And do we have a seconder? We have a seconder. Wonderful. Do we have further discussion? Director Hills.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the 2-week exemption, in 2019 it was not done. So the question I have for staff is, does this 2-week exemption, would it put the water system at risk, like in terms of a balance of prioritizing for public health and the other primary purposes at stage 4? Does it increase our risk? And I would say it increases the risk by somewhat, but is that kind of quantifiable, or is there if it does put us at risk, is there a way to get out of this, like to back out of this in some ways, if for some reason, I don't know what the circumstances would be, that it does put the rest of the community at risk?
Thank you for the question. As indicated by other directors earlier in the conversation, we would consider this as part of our decision making in general. However, the last year we did some calculations in terms of what the overall impact could be, and it would be it is expected to be only several percent. And I think with the fact, and that's why the fact that they are commercial metered is important, because that's the way to promote water conservation. Otherwise, we don't have kind of incentive there to actually make sure that during those 2 weeks they're not using a lot of water, significantly more water.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, if a commercial farm has a water meter and are paying commercial rates, do we have a way then, we would have a way right now then to capture how much they're using? Okay, yeah. So that as a follow-up then again is, if we know how much they're using, you can actually factor that into when you call stage 4. It might be that it would be called a week earlier to allow for those additional 2 weeks or whatever, because we have that volume of information. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more discussion of the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Thank you very much. GM Rosenboom.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for making another remark. What staff will do is staff will engage with potentially affected farmers to provide them with the opportunity to provide them with the information that if they are at a meter rate and they have that status, that they could will qualify for the exemption. And this is relevant for discussion on the next report.
Good, great. Thank you very much. And that moves us to the next report, which is proposed engagement with commercially classified farms. So I believe that's over to GM Rosenboom, or?
Yes, it's me again. Thank you. Staff identified several inconsistencies in the SRD approach to commercial food producing farms. The purpose of this report is to outline a proposal to define commercial farms in SRD regulations, describe how they would be defined, and how they would impact water conservation regulation exemptions and water fees for commercial farms. Staff is seeking the committee's support to engage on these items with the potentially impacted property owners and a report back to the committee meeting in the third quarter of this year, with the intent to implement any changes as per January 1st, 2023. To summarize it, compared to what the previous discussion is, these changes would actually make it mandatory that that you need to have a commercial, that in order to that all metered properties will transition to all metered farms properties will transition to commercial with the BC's assessment will qualify for the exemption that we already just approved in the previous report. I'm looking to my staff to see if this is actually still makes as a benefit. Can you, one of you, help me out here?
Yeah, one of the purposes of proceeding with this is to have clarity in the bylaw as to what is a commercial farm. Right now, we don't have it defined, and we have exemptions with some language, but this gives us a defined commercial farm, and then we can apply exemptions, building, etc. As a result.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think this is very proactive, and it actually provides certainty for a path forward for our farms, so that when we get into stage 3, for example, or move into stage 4, there's clarity for them about, yes, we qualify, no, we don't qualify, and they can then plan accordingly when they're doing their farming. Thank you.
Yes, and I'll also emphasize the other piece, which is that we're looking at how we're going to bill people for water volumetrically. So if we've defined the farms, then we can define a rate for the farms and everybody knows who's paying what, which is really a good idea. So, Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Having in now there's going to be a 2-week exemption at stage 4. Is would that be included in this engagement somehow? Is there, the focus is on stage 1, 2, and 3, and now we've added an extension to that in some ways. So is that going to be somehow wrapped up in this consultation? Do you see a way to do that? I've got some nods going there, so thanks.
Maybe Manager Edward can clarify it a little bit.
I think it will be important to provide a lot of information out, so including the discussion that happened in the previous report, talking about that. It will be, I'm trying to think about how we make the first round of amendments without the definition for commercial farms that we want to engage upon. So staff will have to figure that out. I think we might have to make the changes twice, but it would be important for us to have that discussion with farms at the same time around the exemptions, and then in addition to that, around the definition for commercial farms and the process for metering.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. So can we not add the definition commercial farms now before we go out and do the consultation? That would make it much easier for you for implementation, would it not? So do we want to make, again, amend this recommendation here? And add another, and that the definition of commercial farms be incorporated into the revisions to the 2 previous bylaws that were that we looked at in the previous report?
Would you like me to discuss the implications?
Please.
So I just want it to be very clear.
Please.
So the big difference is that the current bylaw refers to exemptions for commercial food producing farms. And this is really difficult for staff to enforce and to monitor. We don't know what crops these properties are growing. And I think for clarity, it would help us that to access the exemptions and for volumetric billing, it would be helpful that this classification with BC assessment were under the same, like that we use the exact same approach for all of these properties. So that's the change with bringing on the definition for commercial farms, is that it means it applies to everyone, not just based on the crop. And that's why we're proposing to go out to engagement to discuss that change before we make it.
So I'm going to say this is why I like having committee meetings, because if we muff this thing that we're trying to rewrite on the fly, we have another swing at it when it comes to the board and we can correct our wording. So over to Director Seegers.
Thank you. So just for clarification, what you're saying is at this point, we think it's a good idea to change this, but we're not sure of all the implications, and that's why the consultation should happen prior to making the change. All right, I won't put that recommendation in. Thank you.
I'm hoping for a motion.
Okay, well then I'll make the motion as on page, I don't have the right page number.
176.
It is 176, thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't watching. Was there a seconder? Great. Seeing no other hands up, calling the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that also passes. Thank you very much. Next item is item number 6, water sampling services contract extension.
It will be me again. Thank you, Chair. McMahon, the Utility Services and Solid Waste Services Department divisions collect drinking water samples, and source and groundwater samples for these systems and analyze these systems for an extended list of parameters in order to comply with all the regulatory bodies' requirements regarding testing and reporting. In 2019, the contract with Elements was signed for a term of 2 years, of a year until 2020, with options to extend for 4 additional years. There are currently 2 additional extensions possible, of each 1 year. The purpose of this report is to review the option to extend the contract with Elements for another year to April 2023. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there questions? Out in director land. Are there motions out in director land? Director Hills.
Thanks, Chair. I'll move the recommendations as presented by staff on page 183.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? That's seconded. Last chance, folks, to question our water sampling contract. Okay, I'm calling the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Thank you so much. And we are at the bottom of our amended agenda. There is no communications. I don't believe there's any new business. We don't have an in-camera meeting. So I believe all that we have is a motion to adjourn. Moved? Seconded? Nobody wants to leave? Seconded. All right. All in favor? We're adjourned. And are there any public questions? Not seeing any. Our gallery is empty. And I don't think we have any public questions. So thank you very much, everybody. That was almost a record short Infrastructure Services Committee meeting. Thank you.